strengthening Colorado's laws around fentanyl. There's bipartisan agreement to do it, but there's no bill yet. Parents react to our conversation about carrying Narcan to possibly prevent an overdose. Starting again after the Marshall Fire.
There was no opportunity to put them out. There was no opportunity to quell the damage. So therefore, the fires burned intensely and hotter than most structure fires.
That changes how the rebuilding process will work. As we approach a long-awaited and honestly pretty wonderful milestone in the pandemic. All that is next. Fentanyl overdoses are a public health issue, Colorado's leading cause of drug deaths, and fentanyl is increasingly a political issue. Democratic governor and Democratic attorney general both support increasing penalties for fentanyl possession. And Republicans are blaming Democrats for what was a bipartisan decision to ease those penalties a few years ago. Steve Steger sorts out some of the claims you'll hear between now and Election Day.
This is not a drug. This is, I'm going to get a little high here and I'll be fine. It kills them.
Republican Douglas County Sheriff Tony Spurlock says tragedy like the 5 deaths we saw in Commerce City is happening all over the state.
A couple of weeks ago, we had a double fatal in a home, fentanyl related.
His department is currently investigating several cases. Investigations, he says, are harder because of loopholes in state law.
What has happened is that our legislators and our laws have not caught up with the technology and the sophistication of drug manufacturing.
In 2019, state legislators, led by Democratic Representative Leslie Herod, passed a bill making possession of 4 grams of most drugs, including fentanyl, a Class 1 misdemeanor instead of a felony. Spurlock says that change has impacted his deputies' ability to find people dealing the drugs.
We have to have the tools to prosecute them, to arrest them, to seize their property and go up the chain.
Herod says you can still do all that with a misdemeanor.
They still have the tool to be arrested. They still have the tools to confiscate those drugs off of those users. And they still have the tools to put those users in jail right now for 18 months.
The purpose of her bill, she says, was to give drug addicts a chance to get help without the stigma of a felony hanging over their head, which is especially important in this case since most users probably don't know there's fentanyl in the drugs they're getting.
If someone gets fentanyl, doesn't know they have fentanyl, and then survives that almost deadly encounter, should they be a felon or do they need access to resources? I think they need access to treatment. And we need to talk to them and track down how they got that drug in the first place.
So both Spurlock and Herod agree that there needs to be a stiffer penalty for the people responsible for pushing these drugs into the community. Herod says she wants to try to do that in concert with a bill to beef up resources for people, Kyle, who are struggling with addiction, something you see every day as you move through the city of Denver.
And you have Republicans in the state legislature who have come out and asked for it to go back to felony status. At the end of the day, I mean, this is really a debate within the Democratic caucus at the state assembly because they control both sides. If the governor will sign it, they don't need a Republican vote to do it.
And you have something of a split here because you have both the governor and attorney general, both Democrats, who say increase the penalties for possession. Yet you have Herod and a lot of people who passed these reform measures a while ago saying possession's fine the way it is. Let's focus on the problem, which is getting these dealers out of town and getting them off the streets to make sure that the drug doesn't make it into the community.
Steve, thank you. So we've been talking about it this week. City of Denver is mailing Narcan as well as fentanyl testing strips to any resident who wants them. That program is live now. Outside of the city of Denver, you've reported back varying levels of success obtaining Narcan, or naloxone, that's the generic form. You do not need a prescription to get it in our state. The cost, though, may vary by your insurance. And some Next viewers have told us that they contacted pharmacies that were seemingly unaware that the state has a standing order that you can get it without a prescription. Stop the Clock Colorado is a resource to find out which pharmacies near you carry Narcan or other forms of naloxone, which can reverse an overdose. The state's health department also has a list of nonprofits that offer it for free or at a discount. We've put both links in the next section of 9news.com. We are getting some strong feedback tonight after I said here last evening that I plan to carry Narcan on the off chance that I could help somebody who's having an overdose. We got some predictable messages about how junkies deserve to die. And then we got letters from parents. Here's some snippets from those. From a mother. I carry Narcan because I lost my son. He got a Percocet from somebody. He took it to sleep. He had anxiety and the COVID shutdown hurt him. I found him that day, and I'm wrecked. Got this note from a father in Lafayette who wrote, "My sweet baby girl, 16 at the time, overdosed on a fentanyl-laced pill. It was her first time trying pills." The father writes, "I found her unconscious, had no idea it was an overdose." Thankfully, that father says a Lafayette police officer arrived in time with Narcan. That parent now asks that all parents of teenagers consider keeping it at home. He told me that his daughter celebrated her 17th birthday last weekend. State of Colorado is on pace to drop below the 5% COVID positivity threshold within the next 24 to 48 hours. Under 5% again is where the virus is considered to be under control. Haven't been there since the end of July. So we're 6 weeks past the peak of Colorado's positivity rate. At the height of the Omicron surge, nearly 30% of official tests were coming back positive. Tonight's next question comes to us from Marie.
I've been watching as you've been reporting the decrease in the positivity rate, and it made me wonder how much of the decrease is actually due to the now available, easily available home test kits. Those results aren't reported to the state. I'm wondering if there are any research or thoughts about that.
That's a smart question, Marie. So the state health department says the number of official COVID-19 cases was always thought to be lower than the number of cases circulating in the community. It makes sense. Some people didn't know that they had COVID. Other people had mild cases. Sometimes even with more serious cases, if you just tested positive at home, you weren't necessarily calling your county to report that. So the state has always used the official testing site positivity rate as the general guide of the virus's spread throughout the pandemic. Keep the questions coming on any Colorado topic, because if you're wondering, somebody else is too. Record it on voice or video like Marie did and email next@9news.com. We'll go looking for an answer. ICU bed capacity is another thing to be pleased about in terms of where we stand right now in the pandemic. The capacity is slowly increasing. The line there is percentage of beds in use, so trailing down. 88% of ICU beds across the state over the last week were occupied. 181 beds are currently available if needed. You can tell the strain on the system is easing after another exhausting stretch for healthcare workers. The legislature is going to consider extending closing time for drinking establishments until 4 a.m., which certainly sounds enjoyable for people without children or other life responsibilities. The bill is set to be debated at the Capitol next month. If passed, liquor licensees would have an option. They could open 2 hours earlier or stay open 2 hours later. So here's the deal. Currently, places can sell liquor 7 a.m. to 2 a.m. This bill would allow businesses to either go for an early start at 5 a.m. or a late finish at 4 a.m. The times bump each other in the night. Opponents say that this could mean more people out drinking and driving when they normally are not.
We're concerned that having different bar times across the state is going to lead to people making the decision to drive from a bar that closes earlier to get to a bar that closes later, possibly making that bad choice to drive drunk.
So if you're thinking, what bar in the world is thinking they want to be open at 5 a.m. as opposed to staying for the late night crowd, we talked to Mark Berzins, whose little pub company includes the British Bulldog at Stout and Broadway. Got a lot of soccer fans that show up there in the wee hours of the morning so they can watch their favorite teams live.
I don't think any of our places would take advantage of extended hours on the evening end. None of my staff wants to work that late, but for the British Bulldog, I would love to be able. We're opening early anyway. I would love to be able to provide for my customers, my 100% sober customers, a little taste of home while they're watching their soccer team play.
Berzins pointed out to us that in his view, the rush of bars all closing at the same time also leads to issues with too many people trying to get a ride home at the same time. And he thinks that actually some people extending on the late side could space out the safe ride resources, the ride shares, a bit more, and might even lead to fewer people making a bad decision to skip the ride share and drive instead. She wants to create wedding websites, but just for straight couples. She's hired the lawyers that took a wedding cake case from Colorado to the Supreme Court, and she has a date there too.
These fires were not typical structure fires.
Foundations remain after the Marshall Fire. Could those be the beginnings of new homes? Or does it all have to be dug out of the ground? You asked, we found an answer. Next. Douglas County School Board may slow down its speedy search for the district's new superintendent by just a touch. Board's meeting right now. Later tonight, they'll vote to approve a timeline for finding the new superintendent. If you've been following along, the conservative majority school board voted to fire Superintendent Corey Wise earlier this month, ended a 26-year career with the district. They fired him without specifying a cause. That led to a big payout. Board president later said on talk radio that they had a reason to fire him for cause. They just chose not to use it. So the plan is to hold a special meeting a week from today to screen applicants. 2 days later, they'll vote on finalists. They're planning a finalist forum March 10th and could make an offer. The meeting on March 22nd. The entire process from firing the old superintendent to picking a new leader of the state's largest or third largest school district would be about a month and a half. Last time Dougco hired a new superintendent, the process took 5 months. Denver Public Schools took 8 months to pick its current superintendent. May I make a recommendation? I want to point you towards something that came from a quote-unquote competitor, another news station, but I think it's well worth your time. It's a double deep dive on our trains in town from the talented Nathaniel Miner with Colorado Public Radio in Denverite. He has a story out now on why RTD's trains don't crisscross our neighborhoods in the Denver metro area the way that they do in a lot of major cities. This is part of his larger multi-part podcast and article series on how RTD's light rail dreams never translated into ridership reality. We've got links to the article and the podcast on the next Facebook page.
Cloudy, cold today, bitter cold temperatures in the single digits. Our high temperature today at 8 was a record cold maximum. We're hovering in the single digits this hour, but it feels like 7 below in Denver. And because out on the eastern plain, the wind chill values are going to go to 25 and 30 below. Wind chill warnings, wind chill advisories out. And so you need to make sure you're prepared if you're out for any length of time and protect the pets as well. Additional snow coming in as the next weather system approaches southern Colorado. Winter storm warnings out for heavy snow in the Colorado high country. Light snow here in Denver off and on tonight through the drive tomorrow morning. Probably an inch or two of snow at best. The heaviest snow will fall to the south and to the west of the metro area under those winter storm warnings. We stay in the single digits for the next few hours with light snow. We have another bitter cold day tomorrow. We start to break out of it Thursday with the slow warming trend for Friday and the weekend.
Colorado's anti-discrimination law is headed back to the U.S. Supreme Court. A lot of homes burned down to the foundation in the Marshall Fire. A next viewer asks if those foundations are salvageable for new homes. We reached out to one of the people who helped rebuild Grand County after the East Troublesome Fire. That's next. Making an important delivery, apparently. U.S. Supreme Court plans to take up another anti-discrimination case out of Colorado. This one involving a website designer from our state named Lori Smith. So she has a website design company, 303 Creative, and she says she wants to expand into wedding website services, but not for gay people. That decision would go against Colorado's anti-discrimination law, so she's filed a legal challenge.
Artists don't surrender their freedom of speech when they choose to make a living by creating custom expression. Those who create speech for a living are entitled to the full protection of the United States Constitution. Just because we communicate one viewpoint doesn't mean we should be forced to promote an opposing viewpoint, and laws should not be weaponized to force us to do so.
Last year, the U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in Denver denied her attempt to overturn a lower court ruling, tossing out her challenge. Now the Supreme Court's going to take it. It's only going to look at the free speech issue. The court said it would decide whether a law requiring an artist to speak or stay silent on an issue violates the free speech clause of the First Amendment. Colorado's anti-discrimination law prohibits discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation. This is the same issue, you'll recall, that was at the center of the case of the baker from Colorado, Jack Phillips. The Supreme Court took that case, ruled on it in 2018, and it found that Colorado's civil rights commissioners acted with an anti-religious bias against Phillips. He wouldn't bake a cake for a gay couple's celebration. The Supreme Court did not rule in the cake case on the larger issue of whether a business can invoke religious objections to refuse service to LGBTQ people. Both Smith and Phillips are represented by the conservative law firm Alliance Defending Freedom. A lot of the houses that were destroyed in the Marshall Fire burned clear to the foundation. Next viewer in Windsor was curious if the foundations that burned are still structurally sound. Talk so much about the cost of rebuilding. Perhaps some costs could be saved by rebuilding on those foundations. We took the question to a retired structural engineer, Bob Hunnis. He's been the fire recovery liaison for the Grand County Builders Association since the East Troublesome fire. Builders in Grand County had similar questions about the structural integrity of burnt foundations. As to whether they can be built on again, he said, it depends.
Is that these fires were not typical structure fires. There was no fire department there. There was no opportunity to put them out. There was no opportunity to quell the damage. So therefore, the fires burned intensely and hotter than most structure fires, and the high winds certainly caused even higher temperatures. What we learned at East Troublesome was those high temperatures caused pretty severe damage to homes that had full basement walls that were exposed to fire. I think many of the homes in the Marshall fire will be similar, although there may be some that had shallow foundations with floor slabs. Those might be salvageable.
He told us in the end, it's usually going to be cheaper to start the build from scratch and take the old foundations out rather than doing all of the structural testing to see if what's still there is sound. It's one final chance to show Iceland some post-Olympic love. And your feedback next. If you joined us for Next, but before 5 p.m. during the Olympics, then you know that we picked up Iceland as a side piece to our First Love Team USA. Sadly, Iceland did not win its first ever Olympic winter medal in Beijing. Savvy Next viewer noted that anybody wishing for just one more evening with our Icelandic crush could always tune in to see the soccer team play the U.S. in the She Believes Cup. It's a 4-team international women's soccer tournament. That Iceland-U.S. game is 7 p.m. tomorrow night on ESPN. An unbelievable amount of feedback last night and tonight about our discussion about whether folks should consider carrying Narcan, a drug which can reverse an opioid overdose. Don Runyon says, thanks for the suggestion to carry Narcan. I honestly don't understand the backlash. As a swimmer, I'm glad I know CPR in case somebody needs help. As a hiker, I'm glad I took a wilderness first aid course for the same reason. Now I'll carry Narcan. For some perspective on why people are dismissive of the idea, I offer you Steph's feedback. She writes, I live in the suburbs. I don't need to carry Narcan. Tammy says, my daughter died 15 years ago of an overdose. If there were Narcan in every home, she might still be alive. Blue Right wrote in to say that she had requested some Narcan herself and said, why? Because I know of 3 young people who have died from an accidental overdose. They were loved and their lives had value. Beware the folks telling you that only a certain type of person can fall to a fentanyl overdose. You're smarter than that, and you know it's happening in communities across Colorado. See you next time.